While Australians will commemorate the bombing of Darwin this weekend, many will be unaware that the attack was part of a Japanese move to take the island of Timor. Historical records show the Japanese targeted the port, planes and ships in Darwin Harbour to stop the Allied forces responding to their invasion of Timor. Emma Masters reports.
Antonio Maia bears the scars of the Japanese invasion of his island home of Timor in 1942.
Came out, enter from here and enter from, came out from here.
Antonio Maia was on patrol with Australian troops in Timor when they were ambushed by the Japanese.
They shot me 3 times, 1 in my shoulder and 2 in the stomach. 6 of us were wounded and 1 was my cousin. 3 Timorese were killed and 6 Australians were also wounded.
Antonio Maia carried one of the bullets in his body for more than 50 years until it was surgically removed. Just 12 hours after the bombing of Darwin in February 1942, more than 6,000 Japanese troops landed on the island of Timor.
Timor was an absolutely pivotal island for them to capture, and without it their forces would have been very much at risk. And that's why they were so much focused on knocking out those forces in Darwin so that the Allies would not then be able to launch a counter-attack.
The small contingent of Australian commandos already on the island took refuge in the mountains.
Natives use bamboos for almost everything, even a shower bath.
Hundreds of Timorese helped the Australian troops wage a campaign against the Japanese in Timor.
It's a Jap looking for them, but from the sky he sees only jungle and scattered native villages.
The Australians worked with the Timorese to attack in dangerous but effective guerrilla operations.
Well, it was very much a behind enemy lines operation. They relied very much on living off the land, on relying on the support of the Timorese people who were able to feed them and guide them and protect them. So it was a true guerrilla operation.
Only a comparatively small patrol of Aussies can be spared for the job. They will rout the Japs, and the natives will then deal with their perfidious countrymen.
Many of the Timorese were won over by the Australians' fighting spirit.
Because they were attacking the Japanese at will and were winning the battles, the people from Portuguese Timor thought they were heroes. As a result, a number of the younger members of the Timorese people attached themselves to the men as porters.
We carried the weapons and we carried the bullets and we helped the Australians find food and water.
Antonio Maia now lives in Darwin with his wife Veronica. He's been sharing his story with sister Eufemia Lacera, whose Timorese father was also shot helping Australian soldiers during World War II.
He risked his life for Australia. I was proud of it.
Many Timorese paid a high price for their loyalty to the Australian troops.
The Japanese discovered my uncle was hiding Australians. The Japanese set fire to his house, tortured him and then killed him.
For months after the Japanese invasion of Timor, the fate of the Australian commandos was unknown and they were listed as missing. Their heroic efforts only came to light when they made radio contact with Darwin.
They melted solder out of old gear and caught it in bamboo for reuse. And after many heartbreaking failures, they got a signal through to Darwin.
It wasn't until they built a radio out of bits and pieces of receivers and batteries and that they actually got through to Darwin to tell Darwin that we're still a fighting force.
The Honourable Sons of Nippon light out for the big timber, lengths in front of the native population.
Our guerrilla forces actually played a very effective role in tying up large numbers of Japanese troops, and that was when our forces in Timor, with the commandos, were launching these hit-and-run raids on the Japanese and forcing them to reinforce their troops.
From the time the Japanese landed until the end of the war, tens of thousands of Timorese civilians perished. About 40 Australian troops were killed in Timor during the commando attacks.
They accounted for about 1,500 of the Japanese for the loss of about 40 of their own people.
For those and their families who fought in the war, it's hoped this little-known story becomes more than a footnote in history.
As a country, we really did have our back against the wall. There were a lot of men, fought very bravely to turn that around. It is a really important moment in Australia's history. It's a moment we should never forget.